Let's start with injuries, shall we?
With the positives.
Why not? Partey, first of all.
Yeah.
What's the latest with him? Because the last we heard, he just got injured a day before the Seville game.
He's got a muscle injury, and we expect him to be out for a few weeks. We don't really know still the extent of it, and he has more tests today. But he picked up that injury in training, the last training session, the last kick of the ball before Seville. So, very unfortunate.
Is it the same injury that he'd previously done?
No, it's something different.
And it happened in the training, but he obviously played 5 minutes for you, didn't he, against City, and then he went and played at Ghana. Do you think that might have contributed?
Well, I don't think so. He was coming from a period of absence, and he needed minutes, and he played with the national team, and we tried to be always in touch with them. And then we have 2 games with Chelsea and Seville very, very close, and we decided not to load him on the first game to play him in Seville. And then that happened in training. So sometimes it's difficult. You try to prevent. If we would get injured against Chelsea or against City, we would have said that we have rushed him, But then you rest him and he gets injured. So it's things that happen in football.
And Gabriel Jesus, because you were quite concerned, him less so. Has he had a scan and how's his hamstring?
Yeah, again, the scan showed that there is a muscle injury and we might lose him for a few weeks again.
So maybe sort of after the next international break we'll see him? Or?
With Gavi, I cannot give you any time frames because he always surprises us. But there is something there. He felt in a really awkward action, and it's true that he had quite a lot of load in the last few weeks with the national team and then playing those games, which he hasn't done in a long, long time. And that's really bad news for us.
We've spoken a lot this season about how you're in a much better place in terms of personnel and in your mind about trusting others.
Yeah.
So being able to rotate maybe the squad without those players or looking at these next 2 games, how much better are you feeling about being able to do that, if you like, and particularly the way that your subs have performed?
Yeah, well, when we have 3 big players, now with Julian, there's a long-term injury with Thomas, with him. One thing is to rotate the squad, and then the other thing is to have the squad available to pick the right players to rotate them in the right moment, because then you are rotating the squad for the first game, but after the squad needs to carry on playing with the injuries, and this is what we want to avoid. But with the schedule that we have, the amount of games that we have is something that we knew was going to happen. It's happening to every club in the Premier League, so there's no difference.
And in a sense, it's maybe happened a little bit to your captain. Is there an idea that maybe he needs a little bit of rest, recovery? I don't know. He's not having the same influence that he would have had earlier on in the season. He set the bar obviously quite high, but the last few games he looked a little bit tired on Tuesday night.
We discussed that to get to the level that they perform and our front players last season. That's just very, very difficult to see. Well, it hasn't happened in the Premier League. So we need to be conscious of that. But that's about form, about as well putting him in better positions and doing things better in certain areas to help him to have the game that obviously helps him to exploit his qualities. And they have played as well a lot of minutes. And that's a consequence to that.
And just finally from me, because we're also speaking to Declan today, you've talked a lot about how surprised at how well he's gone. Does 100 million or so look quite cheap now? And how good has he looked in, particularly second half when you really needed him, or in the games when you've really needed him to dig deep? How impressed have you been?
He's been terrific for us, and I think he has really perform at the highest level, especially on big games, and that's when you want to see your big players, and he has to step out there, and his contribution in these games has been really, really important. So really pleased.
Hi Mikel, good afternoon. Chelsea and Sheffield United are 2 very different teams, but in terms of the performance, what's the biggest area of improvement you would like to see as a collective compared to the most recent Premier League game?
Against Chelsea? Especially the way we started the first 15-20 minutes, especially the way we lost momentum by losing certain very, very key duels, and that changed the shift of and momentum of the game. And then for other periods, continue to do a lot of the good things that we do, but all the time seek to be better, to play better, to be more dominant, and as well to be more efficient, especially in the final third.
Will you remove their defeat against Newcastle? Sheffield managed to really challenge most of their opposition so far. What do you expect for them tomorrow?
The same, yeah. Looking at the way they have played against all the top teams and how much they have suffered to beat them, all of them. Some of them scoring the 100th minute, some others really scoring late goals and being really tricky games. So we expect the same. They are fighting for their lives, like we want to win every single game, and it will be a tricky game.
When you look at the way you started the season, you're still unbeaten in the league. What satisfies you the most?
Probably the consistency that we are showing, playing every 3 days in different competitions and maintaining a high level, but as well showing that that is not enough for us, that we want more, that we want to play better, that we want to do things and give no chance to the opponent and keep developing as a team.
Do you feel like comparing to the last season, there's not only more quality in the squad, but significantly more depth?
There is more depth. Obviously, it would depend on the injuries that we picked and where we have that depth, because obviously having injuries in certain line is going to affect you in a way where you don't have the right replacement. But so far we are coping with it. Everybody feels really connected, and everybody feels that they've got a chance, and that's a really positive thing to have in the squad.
Thank you.
Hi Mikel, how are you?
Very good.
Tomorrow's game, how do you guard against complacency? Because Sheffield United have yet to win a game this season. You're unbeaten, flying high. So how do you guard against complacency?
Since yesterday, everybody on their toes. Everybody on their toes. Since they walk in that door, they know what is coming, they know what to expect, and I was very clear with them.
In terms of player injuries, as you rightly said just before, a lot of clubs have got them. Player welfare has been spoken about. The number of games you're playing this season compared to last is vastly increased. Is that behind it, or is there something else?
No, I think there are periods, and sometimes you get really unlucky, and sometimes there are things that are difficult to prevent. When you are loading players more, and players that they haven't done it in the past, obviously that risk increases, and we try to manage every single thing to control it, but there are things that are difficult to do, and you have to accept that.
Because it seems that the football calendar will only increase. We've seen this week, for example, the reintroduction of a game now on Christmas Eve, and while it's only one game this year, it might be a whole fixture list in future. What do you feel about that?
That we will need more players. There's no secret. The players have certain amount of energy, and the battery lasts so long. If not, we will burn them, and we will need more players if that's the case, and we will have to adapt.
And finally, we saw at Newcastle this week Sandro Tonali getting a ban for gambling. We've seen it with Ivan Toney as well. I'm not going to ask you to comment on that, but in terms of players, they've got a lot more time on their hands now, a lot more money in their pockets as well. If they have problems, are you a manager that they can come to with problems? Do you, when you meet a player for the first time, do you say, listen, welcome to the club, want you to play well, but if you've got problems, come and speak to me, so that it's not a big surprise if this sort of thing was to happen?
For sure. I think everybody that is working in the organization are at the service of the players and try to help them in anything that they need in their lives. First of all, we have to look after their welfare. We have a huge responsibility to keep educating them and showing them the right values, and as well communicating and guiding them, and trying to give them advice if they want to. So we always have to be close to support them.
Is that almost as important as the football side?
For sure. And especially when players are coming from abroad, they don't have their families, they don't have their relatives, so they can feel very lonely, and they can have a lot of time to think, a lot of time to make some good or bad decisions, and we have to help them to make sure that they take the right path, and they can have a life that fulfills as well what they need within their age group that they are in.
Thanks, Mikel.
Thank you.
Mark?
I'm okay. Just going back to Martin briefly, you've taken him off against Chelsea and Seville. Is that because of you've seen a bit of tiredness there, or because of his performances, or is it a bit of a mixture of both?
It can be, obviously. It can be in relation to the performance, can be in relation to the tactical or how the game is shifting to a type of game that I think somebody else is going to be more suited. Sometimes to get freshness in the team because we have played a lot of games and we need that energy as well in the last few minutes and that's it.
Gail touched on it, but the criticism that he's getting at the moment, is that because he has set that bar just so high?
Because he's an incredible player that he's done and he's doing so much for us. He's our captain, you know, and we expect him all the time for him to step in like with any other players. And this is great because that's the role that he has, and we have developed him into that player, into that person, and now it's about maintaining and sustaining that level, and that's the challenge.
Thank you, James.
Mikel, you said a minute ago that you think we need more players. Did you mean the 25-man squads? Do you think they should be increased?
Well, if we have more games, more competitiveness, and physically the standards are high, we're going to play more minutes, we have to do that, or we have to, instead of 5 subs, we can have 10, you know. Now the 5 subs is something normal. There was a big fight to go from 3 to 5. So I cannot imagine now a game in the conditions that we are in today after the last year and the World Cup that we didn't have the 5 subs. It would be so difficult, you know. So we would have to think, if the calendar extends, for sure we have to think about ways of not dropping the quality, and the only way to do it is players have to have certain availability, and you need players to pick.
Is that, you're obviously a lot more plugged into it than we are, is that a conversation that's going on among managers or, you know, among the shareholders in Premier League?
Well, about everybody, you know, when this is going to stop and how long it's going to take for us to make the right decisions, and the laws will change, and probably our capacity to do other things during games will change as well. It would have to adapt for sure.
And just obviously you've told us you've got a couple of players out injured now, but with the signings that you've made in the last couple of windows, do you feel like the squad is you're better equipped to cope with losing all the team?
I think so. We are better equipped. I think we have more quality, and we have players that fit what we need and our way of playing.
And just finally for me, obviously it's a chance presumably for Ian Nketiah now with Gabriel Jesus being out. There were perhaps doubts about whether he could step into that role last year, but he performed well. He's made his England debut since. Do you feel he's sort of evolved in the last sort of 6-12 months to become that striker you need?
And when you see where he's coming from and what he's done in the last 3 or 4 years, a club like Arsenal to play as a 9, you know, he's made some huge strides, and it's merit to him and his mentality.
Hi Mikel. I just want to ask about Tomiyasu. It's going to be, if he plays his 50th Premier League game for Arsenal this weekend. He said over the summer that he was struggling a bit with confidence after quite a difficult season last season, but he seems to be getting back into a good run of form at the moment. Have you noticed a change in him recently?
Yeah, he was terrific in Seville. I think he played a really, really good game when he came on against Chelsea as well. It's a play that I think everybody loves in there. He's always the first, he's always the last. You tell him to do something and he will give his life for it. You know, it's an exceptional professional player, and he gives a versatility and qualities that nobody else has in the squad. So for me, it's a really, really important player.
You mentioned that versatility there, obviously. Talk about injuries and the need for more players. How useful is it to have someone who can play more or less any position on the pitch?
Well, we had 6 or 7 players in our last line, and that's not enough, you know. So then that means that you need to have versatile players to occupy different positions when it needs to, that actually are comfortable. And that's something tricky, because you start to train a player every single day in a different position, but then you demand him to play in a specific role. That's challenging, and sometimes it's difficult because he doesn't have the relationship, and physically the demands are difficult, but Tony adapts to it in a really natural way, so it's so good to have him.
Mikel, just on the squad size, are you worried if it's not increased, the quality of the league will be damaged, because managers will say, I can't play this high intensity, high pressure football because I've got to look after the players, so will it damage the actual product?
Well, there are a few risks. We were obviously trying not to do that, you know. But I think it would depend as well, the kind of profiles that you have in the squad, you know, how many minutes they can absorb, are they used to it? And there are injuries that we cannot control. And I think we have to focus much more on the quality than the quantity. And for me, that's the starting point.
And just on that, obviously Eddie, an opportunity to play up front, but is Kai someone as well you consider for that sort of position? Obviously his versatility and gives you another option as a number 9.
Yeah, we have different profiles, and Kai, the minutes that he's played there, I think he's been really, really good. So it's good, and I think it's difficult for the opponent as well to figure out who will play, and I think that's a positive for us.